It's time for Wretched Radio with Todd Friel.
Welcome to COVID-free radio.
It's the Wretched Radio mail call delivery bag Q&A infotainment nationwide extravaganza featuring your voicemails, correspondences, communiques, dispatches, memorandums, and missives.
Any special message for all the kids watching at home?
What we need right now is a clear message to the people of this country.
You have 1,200 messages.
That is a bit above average.
Now here's your host, Todd Freakishly Tall Friel.
The mail is here!
Uh-oh.
Not supposed to do that.
This is Wretched Radio. Don't worry, Jimmy is virus-free, at least for today. Did they shove that thing way up your nose?
Actually, I had to do it to myself.
No.
Yes.
And did they say not, or did they have a little line on the stick to say it's got to go all the way up there?
No, they didn't.
Okay, so you just did a little tickle and then turned it over.
That's it.
Okay, so maybe you're not COVID-free. Are you sure this test is reliable?
Well, maybe. I don't know. I feel like that it is.
Wait a second. You went to Larry's COVID testing shop? What is that? What kind of a...
In the back, they had a garage.
Oh, good. Please send your emails to idea@wretched.org. If you have questions, comments, conundrums, or snarks, don't worry. If they're received by Jimmy, you cannot get the COVID. Although apparently there are all kinds of ways that you can, which seem to be mysterious and ever-changing. Nevertheless, don't worry. Jimmy's COVID-free.
That's right.
Gentlemen, what have we today?
I have one from Carl here.
Are you COVID-free?
I'm COVID-free. I believe I am.
All right.
All right.
Is Carl cool?
Carl is cool. He says, this is close to home. My son claims to be a Christian who is now with a woman without any marriage ceremony or specific state license and any current cultural formality. And he wants to know, what's the biblical definition of marriage?
Yeah. Don't be discouraged by what I'm about to say, because it'll get more encouraging and confident for you. Believe it or not, when you study the subject of marriage throughout history, it's sketchy. Furthermore, when you study the subject of marriage in the Bible, it's not quite as vivid as we'd probably like it to be. So how do we piece this whole thing together? Well, this is what we do know definitively. In Genesis, right away, first words recorded by man were a covenant ceremony. That is why we use similar words of Adam for our marriage ceremonies today. This is bone of my bone, flesh of my flesh. Two shall become one, till death do us part. This was all the language that was buried inside of Adam's Hebrew vow to Eve. Furthermore, as we progress, we see that it was an assumed thing based on Adam and Eve, that a man shall leave his father and mother, cleave to his wife. So right away, we're told that there is that union, there is that relationship. And then as you progress all the way throughout the Old Testament, you see husband and wife clearly depicted. Now, what you don't see is how that happened. And we've got to be careful because we do have some historical narratives telling us in some cultures at some times some details. How's about the picking of wives, the selecting of wives? How's about Rachel and Leah? Is that the way we're supposed to do it? Work for 7 years, you get the what? You go, well, no, that was like a deal that was cultural. Maybe it just seemed to happen, so it's a historical narrative. Nevertheless, what did we see, though? We saw that there was a wedding ceremony of some sort. We also see that there is a consummation. Now, please note, there are some folks that take the consummation as the actual, that's when the wedding is actually sealed, when that act takes place. Do we see that definitively described in the Bible? I don't think we do. We see it displayed, but we don't see it as what makes a marriage a marriage. Now let's fast forward to the New Testament. What do we see there? The betrothal of Mary and Joseph? And we do know from history, now it does get a little bit clearer, in the first century Jewish culture, what that marriage looked like, how it came about. And by the way, oodles of biblical illustrations regarding the second coming of Jesus Christ. Nevertheless, we see a betrothal, we see a ceremony, we see a promise, a commitment. Do we see the vows? No, we don't. Who did the vows? Was it the government of Rome? Was it a rabbi? Was it the family? How did that happen? The answer, I don't know. We don't know, really. Paul talks about marriage a lot in 1 Corinthians. He describes that there is a ceremony that something must have happened that brought a man and woman together, and it's valid in the eyes of God, even though they didn't cut, if you will, a biblical covenant in the eyes of God, which is another theme throughout the Old Testament, that it is a covenant relationship. We know that it's an actual marriage because Paul says you can't get divorced. You were married as a pagan to a pagan. You can't get divorced now that you're a Christian because it's valid. How did that ceremony go down? I don't know. Ephesians, we read about what? That marriage is a picture of the gospel. And we do see the relationship. It's defined what the roles are, what it was always intended to point toward. But how did somebody get into that relationship? Don't know. So now, here's what we're left with. We're left with some definitives, and we're left with some sketchy. Here's the sketchy part. We don't know in every custom, in every chapter of the Bible where marriage is discussed, how they got into that relationship. Here's the overwhelming message, though, of the Bible. There is a relationship, and there must be something formal to it. And what I would do in harmonizing the two is say, if God didn't make it clear how you get into it, there's some room for fudging on this and that throughout generations and societies and cultures. But nevertheless, we do see this definitively. There is some sort of covenant-making ceremony that must take place in order for God to see a man and a woman as being of one flesh. There's a contract that is cut. It's oral. It's typically codified. We used to do it in the front of our Bibles. Now we have a marriage ceremony and state license from the state. Nevertheless, there is something contractual about it throughout the Bible, throughout cultures. Even the pagan cultures had divorce. Why? Because there must have been some sort of an agreement that had to have been broken in order for there to be a divorce. How it happens, debatable, fair enough, but it must happen if you do not want to be living in sin. And so I would share that with your son and with the young lady, that this is what the Bible teaches about the subject. And if you are not in that sort of relationship and you are sleeping with that woman, you're sinning. And therefore, you are in danger. Your soul is in danger. You're in danger of judgment, church level and eternal level. So please get married. Now, here's the one that I hear regularly. But we are... Because, everything I have is hers, and, after, and it's we've been married for so long.
And we love each other.
And we love it, and the state recognizes it anyway, so it's not a big deal. And then if that's the case, then do the formal ceremony. And whether it is in the eyes of God or not, God's eyes are on it, and it's valid. So if they want to do something secular, fine. But if you want your son, who may or may not be a Christian, to not be willfully sinning against God, they don't need to get married. Idea@wretched.org. Idea@wretched.org. Former COVID patient, what have you got?
I got an easy one from Vicky.
You were never COVID-ed.
No.
What did you eat? What did you get into?
I don't have any idea.
Were you drinking something in the garage that didn't have a label on it?
I've been hanging out at Mike's house an awful lot.
That could explain some stuff.
Vicky says, or she wants to know, is it wrong to decide to switch churches if you don't have much of a reason to leave the one that you're currently part of?
What do you mean much of a... See, a little sketchy on the details. Was just reading through. I believe we shared that on air. If not, we just did it on Wretched TV. It was a fellow named Ian Clary, I believe, who did a study. It happened to have been of John Calvin's attitude of, I've got it. Ill-advised righteousness. There's a lot of people, now this may or may not apply to this particular situation, but there's many of us who desire perfection in a church. We do, and that's a good desire, frankly. But it becomes ill-advised, our zeal for righteousness, ill-advised zeal for righteousness. You Google that, you'll find the article. Calvin really said, ultimately, because God so desires unity and because his understanding of holiness was very practical, he understood that even though we're called as saints, we're not yet, and therefore an assembling of people who are not yet holy, you are going to have unholy results, and that means no church is going to be perfect. And it is a process, not just in your personal sanctification, but in sanctification as a group in the local body. Then Calvin went on to say, as long as the essentials there of word and sacrament, church discipline, as long as the word is rightly preached, no heresy, sacraments of baptism, Lord's Supper, they're being administered, and there's church discipline that occasionally takes place when necessary, you don't have any great reason to leave that church. Now, doesn't mean you can't, but if it's because you're looking for perfection, you've got a false understanding. Could it be because of your circumstances, your zip code, you don't have a lot of options or any options at all? If those 3 criteria are being met, not only should you stay, thought Calvin, you throw yourself into the work of that church. You commit to it. Oh, but no, I don't want people to know I go there. Throw yourself into it and serve. That is the only way anybody is going to start getting healthier, is if you contribute to it. So can there ever be some reasons of programs and those issues? Yes, but they should be worked out with your pastor. And if the baton can't be handed off to another pastor gracefully, then you're probably doing something wrongly. This is Wretched Radio.
I'll be needing to see some identification, young man.
Why?
Because you, my friend, are a lawbreaker.
No, I'm not.
You are, according to this video from Ray Comfort. Production, I need the clips on time.
911, what's your emergency?
We met about
Yeah, he asked me to
this.
become a gospel partner, and he took my credit card.